Hello, everyone, and welcome to CSM Mastermind. My name is Andrew Marks, co-founder of Success Hacker and our Success Coaching Training Program. We're back for our first monthly live webcast of 2021 today, discussing how to effectively transition accounts between CSMs. This is a free learning event brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training with more than 4,000 graduates across more than 60 countries. Our popular virtual instructor-led certification boot camps run monthly. We offer a 12-week coaching program 3 times a year, and we have a number of standalone courses, all taught by industry experts. Upcoming in the first half of 2021, we're rolling out our level 5 of our CCSM curriculum and a number of new virtual instructor-led programs, including change management for customer success, having difficult conversations, and later this year, we're releasing an entire management training track for customer success. With the new year, we're also making a slight change to the format of our webinars. The new running time is going to be 75 minutes. We'll get through the meat of the content and into the Q&A, but we decided to extend the running time to allow for more Q&A, an aspect of this program that's quite popular with the people who attend. Anyone that needs to leave at the top of the hour, feel free to do so. But as always, we'll be posting this recording and transcription on our website. But know that our panelists will be sticking around until a quarter past the hour for anyone who wants to keep the conversation going. You can find out more and sign up for our events at successcoaching.co. Scroll to the bottom of the page and click on the events link. Ashley will go ahead and throw that into the chat as well. For those of you that haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success. This right now is the only script that I follow during the entire webinar. Now, regardless of the company you work for, the details of your customer-facing role, or the size of the customers that you deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. We also encourage you to suggest topics you'd like to hear about. If you have a suggestion, please go ahead and direct message me on LinkedIn. Once again, the schedule for upcoming CSM Mastermind events, along with a whole bunch of other resources, including webinars, replays, and my Moments of Truth webcast series, can be found at successcoaching.co, so please go ahead and check that out. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. The Mastermind series allows us to focus on the practical and give you real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those out in the wild that are practicing customer success on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists from the customer success community to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people that we've either worked with before or have been recommended to us as being great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. As I mentioned, we will be taking questions later on during the webcast, so please use that Q&A functionality found at the bottom of your screen to ask or upvote a question. I'm very excited to welcome our panel for today, and I'm going to let them all introduce themselves. So let's get started with Vanessa. Why don't you go and introduce yourself, Vanessa?
Great. Thanks, Andrew. I really appreciate you having me here today and excited to be here with other fantastic panelists. Hi, everyone. I'm Vanessa Gutih. I am a senior customer success manager at Slack. A little bit about kind of me and my background. Right out of college, I kind of was thrown into, post-sale customer-facing roles. I spent the first few years of my career in professional services. So, I was helping, big investment banks deploy pretty complex trading and risk management software, which was really fun. After that, moved into a customer success role. This was when customer success was still kind of, coming about. So initially my title was account manager. We switched that over a few months in, as it was really clear, we were a SaaS subscription cloud business and CSM made the most sense. From there, have then worked outside of fintech. I worked at a company that was kind of more e-commerce focused. So worked with a lot of big retail brands that companies like Nike and Nordstrom, which was really fun. And then that brings me here to my journey at Slack. I joined Slack a little over 2 years ago. It's been an extremely fun ride. And I think one of the reasons that Andrew asked me to be here is this summer in 2020, I was promoted to a new role as a senior CSM. And so my book went from around 11 accounts to 3. So clearly I had to transition a lot of accounts in 2020. And so excited to share some kind of thoughts and best practices around how to do that effectively.
Excellent. Thanks, Vanessa. Glad you're here. Marie, you're up.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Marie Vlad, and I am one of the strategic customer success managers from Glia. So Glia is an omni-channel customer engagement platform for financial service companies to engage with their customers via chat, calling, video, texting, or social media, and provide guided on-screen collaboration to deliver customer service digitally. So I have personally worked in customer success for 3 years by name, previously at real estate startups where I've always been one of the first 10 employees. And now I am at Glia, which is a fintech software company. We just announced Series C, and we are hiring with growth through the roof and adding new seats every month and every quarter. So I would love to chat on LinkedIn if you're interested in any open roles that we have across all departments. And I'm really excited to be on this panel today to talk about how Glia tackles strategic customer success and how we help financial service companies adopt digital transformation in a typically archaic industry.
Excellent. Thanks, Marie. Congrats on the fundraising. That's always exciting. And it sounds. So I've been hearing more and more people talking about how, they've coming out of this COVID crisis. They're getting funding. They're expanding. So once again, customer success is a great place to be. So thanks, Marie. And last but not least, a returning guest, Ashley.
Hey there. My name is Ashley McElwain. I am the customer success operations manager at a company called Essity. We are best known for making toilet paper, which really confuses people when we say, hey, I'm running a customer success operation here. But we have some really interesting solutions that we offer in facilities management. That's the type of solutions that I'm working with right now. I actually just recently took the role as operations manager officially, although it's something I've been working on and passionate about for the last 4 years working at Essity. So just went through yet another transition of accounts where I handed off accounts that I was taking care of here in North America. And I have a history in healthcare, which actually had nothing to do with customer success until it did. I sort of naturally fell into one of these roles because someone needed to do it. And it was a really, really great way for me to find this industry. Some 7 or 8 years ago, back when they weren't even calling it customer success. So it's been a really great journey with lots of opportunities for growth, as customer success often gives, and lots of opportunities then to passing along accounts. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Excellent. Once again, I and everybody else on this webinar appreciate all of your time today. So thank you for making it. So let's get to the topic at hand. In your role as a CSM, changes take place as you grow professionally, or your company matures and evolves, and your book of business evolves. Maybe you're transitioning from one segment to another, or as your team grows, it makes sense to reshuffle accounts to balance the team workload. Regardless of the reason, the result is that you'll find yourself in a position where you're going to have to give up a particular account or set of accounts and hand ownership over to another CSM or set of CSMs. So the first question I have for the panelists, I'm doing this tongue-in-cheek, of course, is why can't I just send over a list of accounts I'm handing over with a link to their information on Salesforce and be done with it? I've got other things to focus
on. I guess I can take this one since transitions are a hot topic going on at my company right now. And we do something that's a little funny. It's not if you're familiar with modern dating, at Glia, we do a technique called the slow fade. Not technically called that by any means, but it's when you just slowly back away and become less and less involved from your customer conversations until they transition themselves onto the new CSM. And it's not like ghosting where you just disappear immediately.
I was going to say, it sounds like ghosting.
No, it's more of a slow weaning yourself off of the account. So there are certain key indicators that I'm looking for before I can start the slow fade process. Things like stopping answering emails until the client leaves me off of CC because they're getting faster and better answers from the new CSM. I'm talking less in meetings and becoming less present. The new CSM steps up for ad hoc questions and meetings, and they follow up on any outstanding projects or questions or opportunities that maybe I didn't have time to focus on with that client. So it shows the client that they understand the account and they aren't starting with a blank slate. So the new CSM is there to make things happen, and the transition is really involving the client first. You want them to feel confident and to feel comfortable with the new CSM. You, of course, want the new CSM to feel confident and comfortable, and that whole behind the scenes process is a whole nother thing we can talk about. But lastly, I will feel comfortable and confident stepping away when I see both those groups working together.
Marie, that's a process that really intrigues me. When you're deciding what those key indicators are for when, you've officially handed off the account, or when you think that slow fade process has reached a milestone or an end, is that something that the exiting CSM typically manages? Is something that they maintain control over? Is something that you guys decide on together as CSMs when talking about the account?
It's definitely something that I work with the new CSM on, just because everyone has different speeds of learning and different types of experience when they're joining the team. So them getting onboarded onto our process and our product all kind of need to, ideally they happen before we are onboarding them onto fully taking over the account itself, because of all the moving parts and how much expertise the client is now reliant upon. So there is like an expectation that, for cadences, for quality of service that the previous CSM has set up. And then it's the new CSM's responsibility to either maintain, meet, or exceed those expectations. So it's really an ongoing process for all sides of the equation.
Cool.
So what happens when you set the bar really high, as I expect you would, with your customers, and you hand it off to a CSM that hasn't that doesn't have that same high standard? I mean, how do you deal with that? How do you deal with that internally? Have you experienced that? And how do you deal with that internally? How do you deal with that with the customer?
Yeah, I actually just had a situation with my most recent transition that I feel like this was a little bit pertinent to. I had a customer who I had a longstanding relationship with over multiple years, who had come to expect my style of CSM, which I think is something that we probably should touch on, right? Like, transitioning from one CSM to another, not only do you have to meet the customer's expectations, but there is going to be pain in that transfer if the people have different styles, different approaches, to what degree your CSM approach is standardized, where you are in your customer success maturity as an organization. Those all come into play. Hearing Marie, it was a little bit more about transitioning to someone who's newer to the organization. Is that a different approach from transitioning to a different part of the organization, but an equally experienced CSM that might still have a different style? And interestingly took slightly different approaches with different customers based on what I knew about that customer. So I had a customer, like I had said, that had an expectation, but really we matched up a lot on style. And so I really had a lot of conversations with the CSM that I was transferring this account over to about why the customer responded to certain aspects of my style, why I may have approached them differently than I had approached other accounts, because each of us do that every day. That was what makes good CSMs, right? Like, tailor your approach to what your customer needs. And I found that we had a limited amount of time to transition a large amount of accounts. But taking a week by week process where I would say, okay, in this week, we're going to transition these accounts, that we had that time to sit down together, have a conversation just about that one particular account, and then decide, should I talk to the account first and let them know that the change is coming, or should we present together? Or it really needed to be on an account by account basis, honestly, in my experience. So that was what we did. We transitioned them all over the course of like a month or 6 weeks, so that we could really devote that attention to that onboarding of the new person, and recommendations about what style to take with them, even if it differs from your own typical style. So,
Vanessa, have you ever had a situation where you were looking at transitioning? You needed to transition some accounts off to somebody else, and there was some concern about that that new CSM gelling, like what Ashley said, that new CSM kind of gelling with the personalities, in the account, the key stakeholders. We talk about how important it is. It's not just, you want to make sure that you're always capturing not just the basic business terms of an account, but the personalities and the types of people that you're dealing with.
Yeah. So it's a really great question. And I think just heavy plus on what you just said, Andrew, as well as Ashley, I think that's one of the things looking back that does get overlooked the most in a transition, even from sales to CS and from CSM to CSM, which is, who are the personalities? What are the political dynamics within, your customer team that you're working in? What is the temperature? How many of them are detractors? How many of them are neutral? How many of them are, really champions for kind of, your product and the relationship together? And so I think, we try to do a really good job to convey all of that. It's so important. And so I'm glad that we're calling it out here. To answer the question, I feel like, I was really racking my brain. I have been pretty fortunate in that, every time I've had to transition an account to a new CSM at all the companies I've been at, I have been really confident in the CSMs, just the quality of hires. I also think it's, the outgoing CSM's job to really, hype and champion up this new CSM. This person's great. They might have just joined here 2 months ago, but they had a career in management consulting for all, so just like we always as CSMs try to make our main contacts look like the heroes to the executive sponsors and to their bosses, I think we also should be doing that as well when we are transitioning in a new CSM. So playing up their skill sets and their background and how that's going to add value to the relationship going forward. And I think, Andrew, just on your first question, why don't we just, leave a list of accounts? I think the underlying thing here that we all need to keep in mind is trust. Again, we work hard to be trusted advisors to the customer. We never at any point in this transition want them to feel like that trust is lost or that, the company that you work with is doing wrong by them. And so I guess, that's why we do the slow fade to Marie's points. We really want to make sure that the customer knows, hey, before we're even introducing this new CSM, I've gone over what are your business objectives? What is our kind of joint success plan? What are you trying to achieve? And so I think that just really maintains the trust as we do the transition.
Yeah, I think that's especially important, Vanessa, depending on where the customer is in their journey too, right? Like if you have a customer that is at a really pivotal point in their journey, they need that trust more than ever. And this is a time of instability. So how do you, translate that trust over to someone else? That's really, I think, an impressive skill, and the folks that are good at it are really going to continue to be really successful CSMs because it's really a testament to their knowledge of change management and customer behavior and social psychology and all those things that are so important to being, very successful in that.
And that's a great point, Ashley. But also that begs the question: if you have a customer at that point in a journey, at a precarious point in the journey, do you transfer them? Or,
right.
It doesn't, to me, you're just adding risk. Why add risk unnecessarily if you can delay that transfer for 3 months or 6 months or however long it takes them to get past that point?
Yeah. And so I've always been intrigued. I love the idea of the slow fade, but what happens if a CSM leaves the company? You don't have that opportunity for that slow fade. What are the other sort of ways that can be, used as an approach that are effective and going to lead to success if you don't have the opportunity to achieve your sort of optimal way of doing it, right? There's a lot of things at play can really change the environment around your transition. So.
Yeah, I guess a quick thought on that, again, we've sometimes kind of, I've seen myself in that position. I think when there is going to be a fast transition, you can't do the slow fade. I think I've seen in the past CSM managers or even, VPs of CS really stepping in and really showing and demonstrating, hey, there's a true partnership here, getting the manager to even join a couple of calls if they're going to be the constant between the old CSM and the new CSM. Hey, if there's kind of a sales motion going on or an ups opportunity, maybe the sales manager is going to be in and be that constant for the customer. So I think there are a lot of techniques that you can use when you do sometimes have those kind of faster switches, especially in kind of not the best moments. And I think, again, that's when we need our leadership to come to the table. And on that kind of same track, I think transitions can also be a huge time to really use as an opportunity to re-engage their executive sponsors and bring them back to the table. Hey, as we do this transition with, the new CSM, we want to realign with you. Are these still your goals? What else is going to be new as we look ahead to 2021? And so I think, using the opportunity to bring your execs as well as their execs back to the table, I think is a strategy that can work really well.
That's a really excellent call out, Vanessa. Yeah.
Yeah. Great opportunity to validate. Are we still going in the right direction? Sorry, Marie, you had something to add?
I just wanted to add a piece to what Vanessa just said, because it plays into something Ashley said earlier about hyping up the new CSM when you're presenting them to the customer. Also having them speak about their industry experience and why it's relevant to this customer, and maybe a bit of background on why they may have gotten assigned that account and what new or relevant ideas they're going to bring to the table that gets the customer excited.
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely part of kind of selling this new person for sure. Yeah. Always. Don't be shy about sharing your domain experience, sharing your credentials, right? You still need, it doesn't mean though, back to Vanessa's point, it doesn't mean that you get instant cred, right? You still need to earn that. You still need to earn that trusted advisor relationship, but at least you're, if you're at that point, if the previous CSM was at that point with the customer, the new CSM at least has a leg up because they're trusting their former CSM, who hasn't steered them wrong, hopefully, that this new CSM is going to be able to take the ball and run with it.
It's a really interesting point, Andrew, because I've actually, as a CSM, come into situations where the accounts weren't well handled necessarily, or maybe they didn't have that trusted relationship before I joined. And that poses a whole other host of issues in transition. If you're coming into an account that was maybe not handled super well, or maybe there was a gap, because I've had that experience as well. There are a lot of challenges around that could really put a lot of pressure on you as an incoming CSM to better manage the situation. And, have to have a toolbox of skills and approaches for those types of situations as well. Maybe it was just a matter of, the last CSM, again, back to just their style or their personality didn't match. Yeah. And how can you build a toolbox for yourself to recover that too, and to build that trust when you've already got a broken relationship? That can be really challenging.
And I want to talk about some of the tools, some of the best practices. We already talked about one, the slow fade concept, but you could also approach that, Ashley, though, as the previous CSM set the bar pretty low. So, right.
Awesome.
it's a great opportunity for you, right?
Yeah.
You just got to be better than that.
Absolutely. And not get discouraged by a customer's initial reactions, because if they've had a poor experience, and they're probably not going to be super receptive to start, and you're going to have to chip away at that exterior a little bit to really get them engaged again. I think that's one of the most fun challenges of being a CSM, but I'm a little bit of a glutton for punishment, so I don't
know. So speaking of tools, speaking of some of those tools, that bag of tricks that you want to have for transitioning accounts. One that I've always mentored my teams and my clients with is the customer dossier, right? Is laying out as clearly as possible, and this is an internal only document, but laying out as clearly as possible for the incoming CSM, all the details of the account, the success plan, the objectives, and especially the personalities of all the key stakeholders. What else? What other things like that do each of you have in your kind of bag of tricks when you're dealing with transitions?
I can take this one.
Sure,
so, again, I like the dossier. We at Slack have a very formal transition, account transition document. So it is kind of the job of the outgoing CSM to really take the time to thoughtfully, fill out this account transition plan as best as you can. And it goes through everything. I actually pulled one up before this, and it was like 12 pages long. Now, of course, there were some screenshots and things like that in there. I didn't just like type up a 12-page essay, but we really go deep into what's their tech stack, who are the executive sponsors, who is the day-to-day admin team, who are different champions that aren't any of those above, what are their business objectives, how is that mapped to us? Like it's very, very thorough. So that's one thing, and we use that really well. Another thing that's really important is just, of course, all of the decks and documents and assets that you've, created or co-created with the customer. So, we're a G Suite shop, so it's quite easy to take a customer folder and share over the folder, or, share over specific documents of that folder if you don't want to overwhelm the CSM with maybe some noise in there. And then lastly, I have to mention, because I work at Slack, we use Slack day in and day out. So on the internal side, every customer at Slack, every customer in our, what we call our high touch segments, our enterprise segment, there's an internal accounts channel. So it's, hashtag account dash, and then the name of the customer. The sales AEs are in there, solutions engineer, I'm in there. And that's really where we work. That's where we're saying, hey, we have an upcoming EBR. Here's my first draft at the deck. Hey, AE, can you do slides 3 through 5? And I'll do, the metrics piece. So it's really great, because when there is a new CSM that gets added into the mix, but, even before looking at the document or the deck shared, they can just, we add them into that channel, and they can just see the history of all the conversations that we've ever had about that customer. When if I leave in 2 years and they're like, oh, there's like this product, did we ever talk about this feature with that customer? They can Control F in that channel and see, did we talk about this feature in relation to this customer? And then last thing, I'll turn it over to you guys. Equally at Slack, we really lean into what we call shared channels. Now, again, this is for a lot of our, higher touch enterprise customers, but, really this is even in our scale team, that the one-to-many approach. We do set up externally shared channels with our customers. So their Slack instance is talking to our Slack instance. And that is where we're doing a lot of the work when we're not on more formal calls. And so we do add, obviously once the introduction has been done and we're in the process of the slow fade, I love that term, Marie. We add the CSM in there. And again, now they have all of the history of kind of the more informal conversations, documents been shared, thought leadership pieces that I've shared over time and their reactions to them. They have all the information at their tips as well.
I think that's super important, Vanessa, too. And even if you don't have an amazing tool like that, right, to help with that transition, if you don't have the shared Slack channels and things like that, even just sitting down and having a conversation with the incoming CSM, maybe showing them some of the email conversations that you've had with the customer, help them understand just the tone that you have, that the type of interactions you have with the customer, that really can set them up for success. If they feel the customer is going to, react the best to something that's the most similar, right? That's always a key thing for change. If you make it as similar as possible to what you had before, it's going to ease the transition. So just letting them know, hey, you know what, this contact at this customer, I can send them 62 emails. They're not going to answer me, but dude's going to answer me right away if I send him a text message. And that's just what he prefers. Or like I said, just sharing some emails you may have written, even if the context of the email is kind of irrelevant, just for them to know what type of tone, what is the nature of the relationship, that kind of stuff. I think that really, really augments the ability to have success in that.
I want to jump in.
Yeah, go ahead, Marie.
Just talk briefly about Salesforce, or really any CRM, and how important it plays on in the day-to-day role of the current CSM and the upcoming one. Something I really like to keep track of in there is dates on when changes were made. And this is really helpful for me or any future CSM when you're reporting on adoption during your QBRs with the customer, you want to accurately show them when using new features of your platform or making some sort of operational staffing change led to greater business outcomes for that client. So you want to be making sure that you're documenting every time that you've suggested they do something, following up on if they actually did, and then writing down the date of what happened and any feedback from that session that a certain CSM could use later to address in case there was any blockers or any issues that were reported when you're just kind of thinking about the long-term impact with that client and what else you're trying to get them to do in your success plan.
And honestly, whether it's a formal CRM system or it's just one long Google Doc, right? You should be tracking that stuff anyways, regardless of whether you're going to be transferring, the account over to somebody else or not. That's that type of information. You don't leave that in your head. You write that down somewhere. It's the same reason why you try and describe the personalities of the stakeholders and you put that down somewhere, because once again, even if you never transition that customer to somebody else, if you've got 20, 30 accounts, you will sometimes lose track of all of the different people that you're dealing with, all the different stakeholders. And you're doing yourself and your customer a disservice if you're not tracking that type of information.
One of the things I've done when I've transitioned a large number of accounts is sometimes visual things really help, especially if a CSM's pulling in a bunch of accounts all at once. If you have any type of journey mapping or anything like that set up, the ability to visually represent that, to just like throw it down like a timeline and say, here's where the customer is in their journey. Here's where we've taken steps back before we've taken steps forward, those kinds of things. Sometimes that can be a really invaluable reference, especially while they're still getting to know the account, to be able to pop back at it, look at it really quickly, visually, not have to read a lot of text and say, okay, this is where we are right now. If you have the opportunity to do that, and it can be something as simple as like a single PowerPoint slide, but it seems like it's been a really great resource to have that visual representation of it as well.
That's great. That's a great suggestion. Now, given we have all this knowledge sharing, this documentation, are you, when you do transfer that customer over, are you sitting down with that new CSM who hopefully has come prepared, having read that? I'm just going to call it a dossier because that's how I refer to, having read that dossier and walk through that, spend 15, 20 minutes actually talking through the customer with them?
Yeah,
I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice if you didn't, right? So
I think that's a required part of the process. And I think we talked about keeping track of key contacts on the account and the personalities of any of the customers you work with. Some other things that I like to keep track of are roles and titles, how involved they are, who they report to, what they oversee, and if you know what metrics they are reporting on to their management. Because understanding what motivates people and understanding what other conflicting priorities they might have is going to help the new CSM plan out how they're going to strategize on making champions out of this account.
That's just good CSMing anyways, understanding how their objectives play into how you into what you are providing for them, right?
It can help with things like, if you've been with a particular account for 2 years and maybe your champion started at this level and now they're at this level, right? Now you've brought a champion higher into the organization. An incoming CSM isn't going to know about that journey, but if you've done a good job of, like you said, documenting the roles, the responsibilities, the metrics they're reporting into, you will sort of be able to transfer that knowledge to them as well, stuff that you would normally only gain experientially, right? Like, which is super important to how you approach that person. Knowing where they came from really can alter your approach. So
for sure, your approach and your perspective, right?
One other thing just to add on that, I completely agree, Marie. Everything you said, I was like, yes, just nodding along is like, you do need to meet internally. It's a prerequisite. I would say, especially too at Slack, where we really are like a land and expand type model business. Most of the time, I'm meeting once, maybe even twice with the CSM, reviewing the internal documentation. And then we have another meeting with the AE. So bringing in an AE and saying, hey, let's realign and re-strategize on what is like the sales motion here. And, sometimes there might not be, right? There can be a customer where they've already maxed out all their spend. Okay, maybe it doesn't make sense to have that AE. But wherever there is room for upsell opportunity, we have then a separate meeting, less focused on the product and all of that CSM stuff, and a little bit more bringing in the AE. Okay, great. What's the strategy? How are we going to be realigned together as a united front? And we always make sure that we bring in those AEs for those transition conversations as well. Again, just to keep the trust and keep the relationship going and very strong.
And I would think, especially for larger accounts, kind of those premier accounts, when you are going through the decision-making process of moving from one CSM to another, if the AE is still very involved, they're involved in those discussions. I would assume, correct?
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Anything else to add? Best practices, thoughts, things that we haven't brought up? Because I want to jump into some of these questions.
I think one of the tools that we haven't really talked about that I definitely wanted to touch on is an actual forward action plan. So this is something that's especially important if you do have a customer that's at a pivotal point in their journey and you really need them to get over that hurdle in order to be successful, but it might be impacted by the incoming CSM's lack of experience with the account. So I just recently built one of these for a customer that was in a brand new onboarding phase. They were a longtime customer, their adoption changed, they were using new features, whatever, but it was like right at that point, and there was just no way I couldn't stay on and keep that account for the next 3 months to get them through that process. So what I actually did was put together a sort of action plan for, this is exactly what I would have done if I can stay on, right? Like I called out the specific interactions, really bulleted out the topics of conversation at each interaction point, exactly how I would have done it based on my work with the customer. Shared that not only with the CSM that was coming in and tweaked it and worked on it together, but then shared that with the customer so that the customer knew we were bringing all of our experience together to the table to make sure that they were going to be successful going forward too. Give them the added confidence that this new CSM is really well prepared to keep that process moving, right? Keep their progression going, because they knew they were, momentum was really high and they didn't want to lose any of that. So I think that was a really effective way. And I guess it was still kind of a slow fade because I joined in at least check-in meetings over the course of about a month just to make sure that they were continuing on their progress. And, there was, at the end of each one, there was like here's our homework, here's your homework, and break, right? Like we go and then we come back the following week and readdress it. I think that was really critical in that particular account's success in transitioning over because it was such a volatile time. And I think it's not necessarily that I was being prescriptive to the incoming CSM or saying this is the way you have to do it or anything like that, which I think might be perceived of as in some ways, but it's really just about jointly ensuring that success going forward and making sure that all those things can be considered that you would need to know experientially. So that was really effective.
I think what you're talking about, you're handing the success plan over to the new CSM and explaining we're going in this direction because of this, and this, and here, we're in the middle of this milestone, and the reason why we took this approach, and you're explaining your approach and your mindset and your thought process behind why you've recommended they go this direction. And you're just, because to your point, you don't want to have anything too disruptive that takes them off the path. Right. That's the last thing that we want. Does that make sense? That's good. Good suggestion. Okay. How about we answer some questions? Remember, you got questions you can answer down here. They go Q&A. So right now we've got 9. See if any more come in. The first one is from Sophia, and it's a popular one. It's been upvoted 5 times. Sophia, thank you for joining us, and thanks for the question. If a company undergoes a resegmentation and splits the customer base into managed and on-demand, meaning that some accounts will continue having a dedicated CSM and some are smaller in ARR and are given a general pool, so kind of a what's the word I'm thinking of? A round robin type of customer success approach, meaning that each time they need help, they'd likely get someone different. How do you handle that transition so that the customer isn't feeling deprioritized? Have any of you, I have some ideas on that. Have any of you had that type of experience or know of anybody that's gone through that?
I've had that experience as a customer, interestingly.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of feelings about it based on how well it was handled with several different vendors in the past. I think there are really good ways to do that. And there are ways you can be super successful in it. From my perspective as a customer, there are also super, super crappy ways to do it.
So did you have crappy ways happen to you, or did you have super good ways of happening to you?
I really, really bad one where basically they ghosted us. Because we're using all of these great dating terms, right? Our CSM just stopped answering our emails because in his mind, he wasn't my CSM anymore. But there was never, and I think this was probably just an oversight. I'm going to give the company credit and think that this wasn't an actual structured approach. But they never actually told us we were moving into a CSM pool and that we should direct our questions to this new CSM pool email. And, honestly, I would have been totally fine with it. We had reached a point in our journey where we didn't need as much support. We didn't need as much guidance and direction. We were kind of in our run state, and it would have been totally fine, but no one told us. So I would say definitely don't do that. Be transparent. I think there are a lot of concerns over being honest and transparent and customers, not perceiving that well. I honestly, as a customer, always prefer being really upfront. So I don't know why my customers wouldn't prefer that as well. Just tell me what's going on. Tell me the truth. Be really transparent. Communicate, please. Even if you have to say it a couple of times, that's okay. Definitely don't just stop answering emails, though.
Yeah, I agree. I think being transparent is very important. I also think you need to come up with some very specific things, some benefits. Right? That, hey, you're going to get a faster response time. You're going to get a more, whatever it is. Right.
As the CSMs as salespeople, right? We have to sell too. So,
yeah.
I mean, we're change management experts. We need, people need to see the value or the benefit in any change in order to, want to be on board with that change. And so I think, whether again, there could be instances where maybe there's hundreds of these accounts. So maybe the outgoing CSM can't get on the phone. I mean, that would be my first recommendation is if it were manageable, the CSM that is outgoing would maybe, speak to the customer and let them know that they're going into this kind of new pooled model. Again, where that's physically possible. But if it's not, how can management and that CSM craft a really thoughtful email, having some of the benefits, explaining the change, being transparent? Again, so we can use our change management thinking caps like we do with the customer, but for changes like this as well.
Absolutely. But we need to, once again, think like a customer. And it's not this, we need to be communicating in a way where we're sending a message that this is good for you. Even though it may be good for us, they don't care if it's good for us. They care about is it's good. How's it good for me? And I don't care about the other customers either. What me? It's all about me, right?
Absolutely.
Anything to add, Marie?
No, not really. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, and this is kind of this next question. Thank you, Sophia, by the way, for the question. This next question from Daniel. Thanks, Daniel, for the questions. Also was upvoted here, and I think it's similar to the last one. It seems you are speaking at a high level. Platinum clients, when talking about a transition to a new CSM, when it comes to low touch clients, how would you handle those? Is it an email and good luck, or still something more involved? And once again, I think being transparent, helping them understand, why this is a benefit to them, anything else that you all can think of that you all can bring up that might be relevant to that situation?
I had an experience with this when I left a company in the past and was basically handing off the entire book of clients. I think this is where, like Marie said earlier, CRMs can really shine. If you've really done a very nice job of documenting the interactions, especially if you have the good fortune to have a CRM that maybe connects to your phone system or something like that, where you can really, at a granular level, almost like a support organization would, document calls, leave notes, hey, this customer, especially in a low touch situation where a customer is more on demand, asking for their CS support, having good documentation in that regard, and just notes like, hey, 2 years ago, we talked to you about this. It looks like you guys are coming back to us with the same questions. Have you had organizational or leadership changes? Have some of the champions moved on to other parts of the organization? What's going on that's causing that? That was really important when I was in a situation like that, where it was like, I was obviously not going to be able to have a conversation about every single account. There were hundreds of them. And some of them were incredibly low touch. So.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think this is a great question. I definitely have been in a position where I was managing kind of lower touch accounts, or I was managing a team that was managing lower touch accounts. And, we had to switch over, 100, plus at a time. So I do have some experience with this. I agree. Always the preferred method is going to be where we can have a human touch. Of course, that's going to be preferred, but that's only going to be a segment. So, what is that segment? So you have a group of, 100 low touch customers. Do you have a gain site score? And so maybe you can only reach out to like 5 with like the riskiest, lowest score number because their adoption is just so low. Or maybe on the opposite side, then you pick another 5 where like, hey, they're pretty ripe for opportunity. They're like passing their usage thresholds, every single month for the last 6 months. So, again, you're not going to be able to get on the phone with any of them, but can you strategically approach it with your management and with the outgoing CSM of like, hey, are there some of these though, where it does make sense to maybe get on a phone call? And then for the ones, kind of the mass ones, what we've done in the past is, again, using like our CRM and things like Marketo, is we actually did kind of trigger automated emails to some of those customers. Where again, it really does look like it's going from the outbound CSM, introducing the new CSM, and it'll say, hey, this change is happening. Here's why. We will, if you want to get on a call and chat about, any new opportunities, any issues, please respond back. The trick here, we learned this kind of the first time we did it, was if there are a lot of them, don't send them all and the exact same day and time. Maybe stagger them an actual, like if you have the time a week or so, we learned that pretty quickly. We're like, oh, like a lot will respond if they want to speak this week, which was overwhelming. So anyways, that's kind of one thing to think about as well.
Excellent. Great. Daniel, thank you for the question. Chelsea, thanks Chelsea for joining us. Thanks for the question. Are there other ideas for large, fast transitions? So somebody's quit and giving you 2 weeks notice. For example, a new CSM team is created, and each CSM will be working with 60 to 150 clients. So maybe you've just segmented, and you now need to take all of those bronze customers, those 60 to 150 clients, and get them onboarded, or another fast transition, 2 weeks notice. And you've got a mid-tier segment CSM that's walking out the door, and they own 60 customers. And I mean, there's only so much time in 2 weeks to get everything transitioned, especially when somebody's got one foot out the door, and their heart and mind isn't in it. Any ideas for that?
I really like Vanessa's mention of addressing your sort of riskiest and strongest clients in a situation like that. That's absolutely, if I were now, I haven't been in this position where I've had less than maybe 2 months. So I've been really lucky. But if I were in a position where I was leading a team that had that situation, I would absolutely just target those, the bottom performing in terms of health, top performing in terms of maybe they're a potential advocate or somebody you really want to really maintain that good relationship with. And then honestly, you need to bring in a CSM into that situation who's going to be a good self-starter, someone who's going to really excel in building a relationship in a challenging situation. So I think good recruiting in those situations to do the backfill is really key. Maybe you have a CSM who's exceptionally good at, forming long-term relationships, but they're not so good at making something out of nothing. They may not be the right person to put in that role, even though they're a great CSM. So I think you have to think a lot about what the situation the person's going into and if they're right for the job, really.
One other thought on this. So I am thinking back, and actually do you remember a situation similar where we had someone like leaving a little bit more quickly? And so in no world would it make sense for this person to sit there and write up 75 transition docs, right? I mean, that's just, it's not a good use of anyone's time. But what we did was, using Salesforce, we exported a list. What are all of their customers? What were some of the data columns that were most relevant? And then in the G sheet, we added then additional columns, and it was like drop downs, like promoter, detractor. I mean, again, I can't think of all the columns, but then what we did was we then asked the CSM, hey, just go through the spreadsheet, these 75 lines for each of your customer, and at least just help us by answering, these columns here. And again, it was quick, it was fast. Again, I think to your point, Andrew, if their heart and mind isn't in it, hey, maybe you have to have the actual manager sit in a room with that CSM and they project it up together and they go through and fill it out together. So I think, that at a minimum would be helpful. And I do remember also another experience where someone was leaving quickly. And what we did while we were figuring out who the new CSMs were even going to be, because there was a gap of time when it was like, oh my God, where are we orging? Who's going to take some? Maybe they'll take 30, they'll take 20. Mm-hmm. We just had that person's email forwarded to kind of a new email, and the team was taking days turns responding. So it was kind of a round robin, but that client was still sending it to the same email. Someone else was responding from that email until we could kind of sort out the new reorg. So anyways, just thought I'd share that.
No, I like that. Yeah, Jenny's not here anymore, but I got you covered, type of thing.
Right. And you made a point, Vanessa, that really sparked something in the back of my mind too. When we're talking about management in these situations, it is really on the onus of the manager to make sure that ongoing documentation has always been done well. So that if there is an abrupt loss of a CSM or something to that effect, that the organization's prepared for it, right? Like so much of building a CS org that's effective is, in the operational things like that, like making sure that the management is checking in on the documentation that's happening day to day to make sure that if something like that ever is to happen, you're prepared.
Now, how do you do that? How do you maintain that? I mean, I have my ideas that I've used in the past, but how do you ensure that people are doing that sort of thing?
I've always been a fan of spot checks. Just having managers, maybe they have 10 CSMs with 30 accounts each underneath them, monthly checking into one or two accounts, usually driven by health score, right? Like if I look and see a customer whose health score isn't great, maybe I'm popping into that account to see if, okay, I should be able to, as a manager, log in and see why this account isn't doing well without having to go ask the CSM. Now I might follow up still, of course. But if you see that documentation not happening, then you might have your answer to why the customer is not doing super well right there, right? So spot checks can be a way to do it. And just having, metrics that they're measured against with notes, right? Like if you have an expected communication cadence, you expect the customer success manager to be touching base with the client once a month, for example, you should be able to measure that. So having those KPIs really should give you an indication of how they're performing.
I like the spot checks. I think there's, I've always had a compliance component for variable comp for people who work for me. When we have, whether it's a methodology, whether it's a, very, very customer success specific actions. And that compliance, part of that compliance is the random, there will be random spot checks. I'm going to just know that I'm going to randomly look at some of your accounts and see if you're keeping that information. And it's important. It's really important information. It's important information for you. Even if you never, like I said before, even if you never let go of that account, it's really important for you to capture that type of information. So
Yeah.
thanks, Chelsea, for the question.
One other thing just on that, another mechanism can also just be reporting. So at my last company, we did not use Gainsight. I was managing the team. So we did have a custom Salesforce object where CSMs were logging all of the notes. Was this a drop-down EBR? Was this a normal conversation? So it was there on the Salesforce account. So me as a manager, I have a report. These are all the people who are reporting into me. And these are how many I forget the exact name of the custom object we built, but these are like the CSM, meeting notes objects. And so you could just pull a report and see like which CSMs are logging it or not. I don't know if you can do something similar with Gainsight Timeline, but again, it's even easier than the spot check because it's just a report that you can pull up at any time.
Yeah, and you can just see, are there any blanks? Are people recording the information they need to?
Yeah. And making sure that your team's aware of what those things are being measured on and what they're being measured on. Of course.
Yeah. Yes, and that actually, there's the next question from Yehuda. Any suggestions for tools to keep track of your customers? So we talked about Salesforce. We've talked about Gainsight. Anything else? Marie, have you got anything in particular that you use or that you've used in the past?
Yeah, so we just got a shiny new toy software to help manage our success team. And I think a big contributing factor is how much I've said Salesforce is not called Successforce. So we need something that's built for how we do our jobs.
Right.
So we actually use another startup tool called Julie, which integrates into Salesforce. Okay. And I encourage everyone to look it up because it's pretty cool. But it basically changes the interface and also has some features such as autosave and just automatic syncing or manual syncing. So you can control what fields you're looking at for, on an ongoing basis. What are the things that are updating versus what are the fields that stay pretty constant that you don't want to look at and crowd your screen? It also integrates directly into my Google Calendar. So all of my meetings and titles of those meetings and participants are popping up automatically in my workspace for me to take notes on for that meeting. So it helps really anyone, management, any other CSM or executives looking at the account to see, okay, when are all of the touches happening? It's actually all documented in one place.
Any other? I mean, then there's your classic, your churn zero, your client success, your catalyst, your Tatango, your Gainsight. Any others that we haven't mentioned, Ashley or Vanessa, that you're aware of?
I'm actually in a sourcing process right now for a new CS platform. So I've been really focused on these types of features and things like that. I think one of the things that I've been really excited to see the change in the CS platform industry in the past couple of years from when I did another sourcing project a couple of years ago is that they really recognize the need for integration with CRM now. Yeah. I know there's always been a reality that most of them interface with Salesforce, and that makes sense, right? Most of the tech world is using Salesforce. Yeah. But for those unlucky ones of us that don't get to use Salesforce, now these companies are interfacing with other CRMs as well. And I think let's not reinvent the wheel, right? Like if we can interface with a tool that we know is already really good at helping to track customer interactions, why would we sort of duplicate work or anything like that? Really seamlessly doing that all without adding work to the CSM's plate is the key, I think.
Agreed. Any other platforms besides the ones that we've rattled off that you're looking at?
So
we said Gainsight, Tatango, Churn Zero, Catalyst.
Yeah. I think HubSpot has some of those features as well.
Which one?
HubSpot.
Okay.
Yeah. Client Success.
Yeah.
Strike Deck.
Okay. Medallia Strike Deck. Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's all I can think of right now, but I know there's more. A really great resource, though, if you're looking to build your tech stack for something like that, check out sites like G2. You can get a good idea. Now, take it with a grain of salt. Remember that customer or client, companies are going to drive their best customers to these review sites, right? So just keep that in mind, obviously. But
it's a good data point.
It is. It's a good starting point. It's a good way to build a short list and really start to engage in those conversations.
Yeah, great.
And I guess just the other thing I just thought about, again, if a CSM is leaving quickly, you can't have a transition, you can't understand value. I think obviously at the baseline, I think a lot of us are very data driven. And so again, you're always going to have internal, data tools and data platforms where you can understand how is the customer actually using the product. And, if you're a good enough CSM or if your, company has a playbook and a good level of understanding, there's obviously going to be different indicators of, is this a healthy customer or not? And so in the perfect world, we integrate all that data into a system like it's a Tango, a Gainsight, XYZ. And so that is married with the different CRM type objects. But sometimes, you just do need to go deeper. And so I think that's another tool that at least, I've always used really deeply is, again, like how are they actually using it? What are the leading indicators of success within the product? And just, using that data to be informed about, customer temperature and all of that.
Yeah, definitely.
Lisa asks, and I think this is directed to you, Marie, in particular, are you doing an introduction call prior to the fadeaway?
So I wouldn't have a whole call about it, but I would throw it into like the beginning of the next meeting where you have, most of the relevant stakeholders from that client. So something like a slide, like a getting to know you slide. This is the new CSM. This is their picture. This is where they come from. This is their background and expertise and what they bring to the table. Maybe a fun fact to remind everyone that we're in a customer and a people-facing business. We're all just people too, and we're here to, help you meet your goals, whatever it is. Let the new CSM say a bit about themselves and create that interpersonal connection. And then kind of let the new CSM take it from there, since they have this very small window of time to play the I'm new card. They could really take advantage of that time and get some intel and create a little bit of rapport with some new people that maybe the last CSM didn't get to.
One thing that just sparked for me, and I love this tactic, is again playing the new card. So I as outbound CSM, like I've been wanting them to adopt this feature, but they keep saying that there's a compliance issue or they're not interested or it's not a priority. Like when I'm doing the prep, I'm like, hey, you should really ask, like, why haven't they adopted XYZ? Like I can't ask because they've already told me twice, but you as the newbie, you can go in and ask these kind of fresh questions and kind of re-bring up topics. And so it's actually sometimes great to help the new CSM play dumb, where you do want to like re-bring up things or drive the customer in a certain direction. So again, kind of using it as an opportunity for things.
Also, on the flip side, from an alternative perspective, I loved Ashley's go forward planning concept. Where you could have the new person coming in and they are starting to talk about, I think we should go this direction. And, basically parroting, what the previous CSM was saying in the direction that they were going. And that also would, could really impress your stakeholders going, oh, you know what? Vanessa really gets where we're at. And her, her approach is in lockstep with the approach that we were already comfortable with.
Mm-hmm. It also works on husbands, just for the record. Just saying. Is it?
I'll have to ask my wife that.
I have a friend in another couple. When I want him to believe something, I'll call her and be like, "So I already said it once, and he ignored me." Very effective.
That's a different webinar, folks. So you'll have to dial in another time for that. Let's see. Casey asks, what general advice? I was actually going to bring this up earlier. So great question, Casey. And by the way, thank you, Lisa and Yehuda and Chelsea for the questions. If I hadn't thanked you already. Casey asks, what general advice do you have when a client requests to work with a different CSM for either personality or perceived lack of knowledge issues? Mm-hmm. That could be. I've been in situations before where it's happened not too long after you've transitioned to a new CSM, But any experience with that? Any ideas, thoughts, best practices, advice for that sort of thing?
I mean, I think in that situation, that's really on the management to step in. And, I would argue in very few cases would the right call be to reactionarily pull a customer success manager out and replace them with somebody else. Typically, when you have a request like that, it's due to a different underlying problem that's not being addressed. And I think management really needs to step in those positions and try and get to the root of the issue. Is it really just a personality difference, or is there something missing in how that they're using your product and that they're truly dissatisfied for that reason, or whatever it may be? And you might
come to the CSM as an excuse. They're throwing the CSM under the bus as an excuse.
Yeah, or they really truly perceive the CSM to be the problem, right, but there's something else going on, and that's not the root cause. So I think first you have to have a conversation with management to really try and identify that root cause, work through it together. Management needs to show up to a few calls and maybe make some recommendations like, hey, maybe we change this approach in this way, see how it goes, please stick it out and see, if things get better. To the point you made, Andrew, a lot of times that happens after a transition and it's just growing pains. And they haven't really given that CSM a chance. Yeah. Especially if the CSM is somebody who's not super, super confident when they're coming up to speed, right? Like that's a very common thing. And they may end up being a really great, really confident CSM a little bit further down the road. And you just kind of have to get them through that hurdle.
But I think the key is you got to be really careful, right? Not only do you have to be careful from the customer, from a customer perspective, but you need to be careful from the CSM's perspective, because the worst thing that you can do, especially for a newer CSM that's starting to move up in their career, is just destroy their confidence.
Yes.
And have them think, geez, I can't handle these customers.
I think everything,
and that's not always the case. That's a great point, Ashley.
I think everything Ashley said is totally true. And I think it just goes to show that you really do need to have thick skin when you're stepping into a CSM role, and realize it's not all personal. Yeah. And something I try to do, and for every new CSM to do, or way to think about it, is you should always focus on what you can do to win the customer over, and go in armed with the knowledge that this customer had a previous experience, they have preconceived notions, and your focus should be building trust and rapport, and show them with repeated action and integrity that you're committed to the things you say you're going to do. And even whatever it was that led the customer, being dissatisfied or requesting something else, just kind of owning up to that and realizing, this is my responsibility, whether it was my fault or not, or even something within my control. I am responsible for making the customer successful, no matter what that takes. So I think it really does take a lot, even just as a person with personal growth, to face someone who says like, I don't like what is going on, and saying, okay, I take your feedback. I'm committed to changing that perception.
Yeah. And this job,
I love that, Marie.
You have to have thick skin. You have to have thick skin. You can't take stuff personally, and you need to be able to both be the receiver as well as the deliverer of hard, difficult conversation.
Yeah. I was just going to add on that. This is maybe now a little bit more of like of an onboarding conversation and thought stream, but I think it's worth bringing up here. At SEC and at past companies, especially when I was managing and onboarding new CSMs, shadowing calls is so important. Shadow, again, if you're a new CSM, your career is in your own hands. And if your company doesn't have a formal shadowing program, still Slack, DM, email all your, CSM counterparts and ask them to shadow calls. Hopefully there's something formal, but if not, take it upon yourself to ask as many different CSMs if you can shadow them, if you can hear different styles of delivering your company's message or features. Again, we all kind of manage our own careers, so really ask for that. And then another thing that we do at Slack, which I really like, is we make CSMs actually give a few series of mock calls. So, hey, you have to deliver an onboarding implementation first call. Hey, you have to deliver a mock EBR, and there's like a little mini panel of CSMs that give feedback on it. So again, if your company doesn't have this, ask a couple CSMs if they would listen to you, give them kind of a mock presentation, a mock kickoff call. So again, tactics to at least, make you more comfortable. So by the time you are getting accounts, you feel very semi-confident that you're ready for that.
And Vanessa, that's a really great opportunity too to sort of educate other functions on what CSM is all about. We used a method like that to bring in account managers and sales folks to monitor some of those calls, and so they could understand better too, what CSM is all about, and really, especially in a company where CSM is new and developing, it was really, really helpful. And then it, cuts down on all of those things that salespeople never do, like promising things that we can never deliver. So,
and really important. Don't to your point, Vanessa. If your company doesn't have that program, don't expect somebody to come along and bring it to you. Take the initiative and do it yourself. Right? We have to. There's so many situations in customer success where we have to make the first move. Whether it's dealing with a customer, whether it's dealing with other organizations, especially dealing with sales and making sure that they're setting the right expectations and messages, you can bitch and moan about that, or you can do something about it, right? And don't wait around. Do something about it, right? Don't wait for somebody else to do it for you. We got time for one last question from Jeanette. Jeanette, thank you for the question. How should, and this particular situation, how should we deal with a change of CSM at the same time as a change of the main contact on the client side? Should the old CSM get to know the new client contact first, let the new CSM do it, or do it together? And we got like 1 minute. So start with Marie. What do you think?
I have seen this happen before, and I have to say, you really got to play into that. I'm new. Let's start from a blank slate card. Okay. What is your number one priority? How can I help you with that? And just start the building blocks there.
So you can look at that as an opportunity to make a clean break, right? There's not necessarily transition, although you're going to want to transition a bunch of information about the account, of course, behind the scenes, but it's like, hey, I'm your new CSM and you're my new stakeholder. So let's figure out this thing out together. Ashley, what about you?
I've had the experience of intentionally holding off and doing the CSM transition until we could sort of bring on the new stakeholder, the new management on the customer side. So that's just how we've approached it in the past. It was pretty effective. It usually doesn't take too long to catch the customer up, and then you can start your CSM transition. I think that the key there is just set out from the very beginning that, hey, I'm going to usher you into this process, but I am stepping away. You will have a new CSM. I'm sticking on just so that I can bring the knowledge, the experience, the history to the table before I do that.
Excellent. Vanessa, anything to add?
I do think even if you do that like slow phase approach, I would recommend doing at least one call with like all 4 of the contacts. Because again, it's just really great to have that new contact hear from the old contact's mouth, priorities, how they view the world. So I would at least just try to strive for at least one of those types of calls.
Excellent. All right. We're at the end of the hour, or the end of our hour and 15, our webinar. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us today. Thank you, Vanessa, Marie, and Ashley, for the time. Great to see you all, and hopefully we'll have you on again. One final note: great CSMs know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created CSM Mastermind, to harness the knowledge and experience of the community to help improve everyone. So we hope you got something out of this discussion. Please share what you got out of it on LinkedIn if you'd like. And we'll see you at our next event on February 24th, when we'll be discussing managing change effectively. Something, as Vanessa said, is something that we need to do well in customer success. Check out successcoaching.co to find out more and sign up. Have a great rest of your day and week. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.